straight away, I will be able to start from a little basics on ethical hacking terminologies, so that we can be able to see on these technologies. So in the previous classes, we defined what is a threat. So, and I think we agreed clearly that a threat is an environment or a situation which could lead to any potential risk. So anything that leads to any potential risk would be classified as a threat. Now, we also agreed on an exploit to mean a piece of software which takes advantage of vulnerabilities. So an exploit is any piece of software, a bug, maybe a flaw, design flaw in any software, which maybe it will lead to privilege escalation or denial of service to those ones who have a right to access those particular services. Another important thing we agreed was on remote exploit. As soon as you have understood an exploit is anything which can take advantage of vulnerabilities, you need to classify between remote exploit and a local exploit. You see, a local exploit is that a particular exploit which leads to increase in privilege escalation, because normally it happens within the setup of an organization, insider, you see? So that's a local exploit, insider, while a remote exploit is the one which happens over the network. And normally that person is not aware of systems which normally are running inside. So when we classify it as a remote exploit, these are people without prior access to the vulnerable system. So we put them under remote exploit. So distinguish clearly between local exploit and a remote exploit. Another important thing to note is a target of evaluation. So when I say target of evaluation, I mean a system or a program or a network that is subject to security analysis or attack. So when I say target of evaluation, that is the system which hackers want to exploit. So that is it. Another important concept you need to get is an attack, which we have agreed before. So attack occurs when a system is compromised, as simple as that. So as soon as a threat has exercised its action, that is when we say an attack has happened. So a system is compromised based on vulnerability, as we have agreed that vulnerabilities are weaknesses within the system. Now, straight away, I'll want us to discuss on the different hacking technologies. But before that, I want to agree with you some of these, before we move to hacking technologies, what are these areas do hackers target or try to hack? So those tools which exploit weaknesses, normally exploit weaknesses, for example, one in operating system. They would want to uncover what are the weaknesses within the operating system that you are using. So you realize most of the time system administrators install operating system with default settings, you see? So when you just leave default settings, for example, servers or server operating systems, normally this might be a potential route for exploiting vulnerabilities. Most of the time, if I would go with settings which are not, I think you have seen when you're installing operating systems, it tells you to use recommended settings or custom settings. So it is upon you to decide. So if you go by default settings, normally these hackers have studied and understood if someone would install by default settings, what are the potential areas that remain unpatched so that I can be able to attack, you see? So they normally come to the operating system. They also attack applications. Normally, a majority of applications that people normally develop, people just want to develop so that they achieve a certain task. But at the back of the mind, they don't adhere to security requirements. So normally these applications are not tested. So you see, that's another platform that hackers try to attack. Shrink wrap code. When I say shrink wrap code, I mean those code which normally come on many off-the-shelf programs. So normally shrink wrap code comes in as extra features. So which normally users are are not aware, or which can be used to exploit the system. So one example of this is macros. If you've seen in Microsoft, there are software which are known as macros, which normally come in as packages built into Word applications. So those macros are a source of flaws, which can allow an attacker to execute a program from within the application, you see? So I can run another program within an existing application. That's what I mean by shrink wrap code, shrink wrap code. Then another important flaw you need to take note is misconfiguration. So systems can be misconfigured or left at the lowest level of security. So when I misconfigure the system, it means I'm allowing in a corridor of unauthorized use. Maybe an attacker can take advantage of misconfiguration in a system to be able to exploit vulnerabilities. So in general, I could say when you misconfigure a system, it is a source of weakness, which an attacker can be able to use. Now, another important thing about hacking technologies is understanding the method of attack. So you see, sometimes we classify attacks into passive or active. When I say passive attack, I mean those people who want to get information, but they don't want to disrupt the operations which are going on. But when I say an active attack, I mean that person who wants to bring disruption, who wants to bring denial of service or bring down the systems or drop the entire database, you see? So when I say an active attack, I mean that person who wants to destroy the infrastructure. While a passive attack, sometimes I would classify as a person who just want to obtain confidential information, but might not want to bring down the infrastructure. So understand between a passive attack and an active attack. To mean passive, I just want to obtain information. And normally, we would put in these attacks into an active attack tries to bring down availability, integrity, and authenticity of data. That is what an active attacker wants. Sorry, I think we have sound. That's Velma. You can mute. So I was saying an active attack affects availability, integrity, and authenticity of data. While a passive attack, on the other hand, attacks breach of confidentiality. Because you see, when I talk about passive attack, I mean that person who just want to obtain some information or for his own purposes. Maybe I want to know what is happening, you know? That is breach of confidentiality, and you are a passive attack. You see? It is not as such disastrous like an active attack. So sometimes other people categorize attacks into inside and outside attacks. So I would want to put generally an attack originating within the security perimeter of an organization is known as an inside attack, while the one which is originating outside the perimeter, the security perimeter of the firewall, for example, I would put in as an outsider, and that becomes an outside attack, outside the security perimeter. For example, if you are accessing remotely over the internet, or you have a remote access connection, that is an outside attack. Now, generally, in this concept about attack, you just need to differentiate and understand an active and a passive attack, and also differentiate between inside and outside attack. Now, straight away, I want us to move to understanding different phases involved in ethical hacking and some of these ethical hacking stages that you need to understand. So I'll share with you a diagram which shows phases of hacking so that we can discuss these hacking phases. So Sure. So those are the different phases in hacking. So I'll move straight to discuss some of these phases. Now, straight away, when I talk about the hacking phases, the methods that attackers use to be able to access systems, or the steps that hackers normally follow to be able to attack our systems. So it starts from reconnaissance, which we'll deal in detail. Learning, you see, you start by reconnaissance. You learn the systems first. You learn the technologies that are in place. And then now you move to scanning. You scan for vulnerabilities. Once you have understood the weaknesses, you now gain access. After you have gained access, you maintain access. While you're maintaining access, you are getting whatever you want from the system. And then now you cover tracks. You need to know where you have passed, you see, so that you need to hide yourself from being caught. Because if you access using your system, sometimes you can be traced back. So you need to be very worried when you assist others' machines or your PCs, because your machine might be used to hack other systems, which can be traced back to your IP. So you see, so you need to cover tracks after you have done an attack. And I'm talking in this class in the sense of ethical hacking. And that's why I'm saying stages in ethical hacking. You see, so we have also passive and active reconnaissance. So when I say passive reconnaissance, you are gathering information without the target or individual company's knowledge. You see, just from the outside understanding, passive reconnaissance, you are not understanding what is happening, what is the systems in place. You don't have information, more information about the system. So some of these issues on passive reconnaissance include watching a building to identify who enters in, at what time. You're trying to monitor the actions that people do. So this is usually done on internet searches by Googling an individual or a companies to gain information. This process is generally called information gathering, you see. So social engineering and dumpster diving are also considered passive information gathering methods. In the introductory class, we must have talked about social engineering, where you are trying to trick an individual. You see, you are trying to convince someone so that you can obtain information. Dumpster diving, you go to the dustbins and then understand what are these papers that these people are using. You try to see what information you can get from dustbin. That is why people shred papers. It is a practice in offices to shred papers, you see, so that people cannot come and obtain information from that dumping point, you see. Other means of passive reconnaissance include sniffing the network. So you are trying to sniff network, and normally it is to identify the IP ranges. IP address scheme for these people, how is it conventionally designed? You see, if I see some of these IPs in Kama 192.168.10.0, I can guess and understand is using a scheme which IP address range, that is class C. It is a class C address starting from maybe 192.10. So definitely, if I guess, I would understand these ranges in Isa Kwanzia Kasabu. If there are around 100 employees, I must guess the ranges maybe from .10 to .100. Then I know the ranges for machines in this organization are within this IP address range. Then I can be able to launch an attack, you see. Active reconnaissance. You probe the network to discover individual hosts, IP address, and services on the network. So normally involve a more risk, usually involves more risk of detection than passive reconnaissance. So it is like when you are trying to check doors. If I want to check whether your house is open, I just open and try to shake the door. And then if it opens, then I know this house is not locked, you see? And then I get inside. So normally active recognizers give an hacker an indication of security measures in place. But the process also increases chance of being caught or at least raising suspicion. Kwa sababu, as soon as you are trying to launch attacks, remember the firewall is also keeping statistics of those people who are trying to attack the system, you see? Who has accessed the system, you see? Sometimes ACLs can also be very important. And for example, I've realized that someone is trying to attack a certain service. Then I would have known which source of IP is this. Then I can understand maybe this is a student who is trying to assess us and why. You see, maybe he wants to change marks. Maybe he wants to change the finance so that it reflects that he has paid fees while he has not paid. You see, so you are trying to see what is this service. And normally, when you are doing active reconnaissance, you're trying to use your machine. That's why I said in this class, install VirtualBox. The reason we're installing VirtualBox, it emulates a real machine, you see, but it doesn't trace to your Mac. That is why, as a security student, one thing that you need to master very well is virtualization technology. You must understand virtualization so that you don't use with your machine. So even if you're attacking systems, you don't attack systems using your machine directly. You use a virtual machine. Very important. The second phase we were discussing, for those ones who are joining, we are discussing on phases of ethical hacking, and we have agreed on the first phase, phase one, to be passive and active reconnaissance. The second phase is scanning. So you take information discovered during reconnaissance and use it to examine the network. So you see, tools that hackers may employ during scanning include dialers, port scanners, network mappers, because I have known what are the IP ranges. Then now I can understand what am I scanning, you see, at what ranges. Sweepers and vulnerability scanners, you see. So hackers are seeking any information that can help them penetrate or attack such systems. And normally, for example, they'll be looking on what are the computer names, IP addresses, and user accounts. I have known maybe within this network, there is someone ameandikwa nini admin. There's someone mwenye ameandika jina yake, maybe this one is a registrar. You see, I've already known who has the privileged information that I want based on computer names, you see. Once I have known the computer names, I associate, I try to get the IP addresses of those machines and even user accounts, you see. So that's what happens in scanning. So you are trying to take information discovered during reconnaissance and use it to examine the network. And this is what happens. And I'm talking about ethical hacking. Tomorrow you will be chief security officer or in charge of information security in organizations. Or you are employed as an ethical hacker to test vulnerabilities within systems in organizations. So you need to understand the steps clearly. You do reconnaissance, then you move to scanning. And then now gaining access. Now you have known the weakness. You have discovered the corridors, you see. So you're now going to enter inside, you see. So once vulnerability is discovered during reconnaissance and scanning, then the attacker now gains or exploits the system. So normally, the way hackers use for exploiting include one, maybe through a network connection, wireless or maybe wired, or sometimes some even people try to get inside the systems offline, you see, if we are within the organization, you know. So some of these methods for gaining access include buffer overflows, denial of service, and session hijacking. So you see, sometimes you have understood that this is the IP address that I don't want or I want to bring down, you see. So you send so much or so many requests that the machine cannot handle, you see. which now results into denial of service. Or you have known the privileged information is between person A and person B. So I try to hijack the session. When they are communicating, I try to hijack the session or do eavesdropping so that I can get information which is moving around, you see? So buffer overflows, you're sending too much information, you see? It's almost similar to denial of service. Now, maintaining access. Once you have gained access, you now maintain access. So once hackers have gained access, they want to keep the access for future exploitation and attacks, you see? You remember this, before you gain the access, it has taken a lot of resources and time. There's a lot of investment into resources and time. That is why I want to understand it too clearly that most of these systems, especially for banks, for organizations like Safaricom and many other organizations, normally all these systems, there's no system which is not free of vulnerabilities or weaknesses or corridors. There are corridors in these systems. There is no system which is ever 100% secure. You see? So once a person has invested his time to be able to gain access into that system, you have done reconnaissance, and remember that reconnaissance can be done in months. You have studied over months. Then you now come in to scanning. After you have scanned and you have realized the corridors that you are using to attack the system, you now come in to gain access. Once you have gained access, you want to maintain, you see? You want to stay there because it has been an investment. Maybe you have tried it for 1 year. So you don't want to lose track of how you went in. So sometimes in this gaining access, hackers harden the system from other hackers or security personnel by securing the exclusive access with backdoors, rootkits, and trojans, you see? So once the hacker owns the system, they can use it as a base to launch additional attacks, to still enter the system inside and inside, you see? And I'm telling you, once you have gained access into a system, you will be very happy and you want to stay and you want to learn more and more and more and more, you see? So the owned system, very important word, is known as a zombie system, the one which has been attacked, or the hackers own it or control it in one way or another, is known as a zombie system. Now, after you have maintained access or you are inside it, you now cover your tracks. So once hackers have been able to gain and maintain access, they cover their tracks to avoid detection by security personnel.